Для меня огромный такой минус в Польше – это погода. Здесь очень холодно. В принципе, в Украине было то же самое, что у нас снег, дождь со снегом, минусовая погода, и это, вот, наверное, самое неприятное.
Cześć and greetings from Poland's capital Warsaw on this early spring afternoon. The snow has melted here in Poland. We do get quite chilly winters, and we're looking forward to a season of rejuvenation and onwards into the summer. So in this video, I'm going to answer a question I'm getting more and more often. That is, should you move to Warsaw, Poland in 2024? Let's go.
Experience.
So many people still refer to Poland as being in Eastern Europe. Well, it's definitely, for the locals, considered Central Europe. And in fact, I have tried to redefine exactly the region with respect that we're talking with in my videos as New Europe. And I'll put a link above in the card down below in the description also if you don't know what I'm talking about exactly there. But I'm talking about broadly the region between Germany and Russia. So a lot of the stereotypes about, say, Eastern Europe or maybe New Europe is that it is economically backward. People are destitute basically, nothing works, infrastructure is 20 years, 50 years behind. Kind of the more hangover from when Poland was under communism, for example, and obviously further east you had the Soviet Union. And that obviously retarded the economic development of the entire communist world, you know, behind the Iron Curtain, compared to what happened on the other side, so Western Europe or North America. Nowadays, it is how many years since the end of communism? About 35. Yeah, it's 35. And Poland joined the European Union almost 20 years ago from when I'm making this video. So, as you can see, well, I'm not sure if you can see right here, but it doesn't look that run down or backward. And actually the infrastructure here in Warsaw is quite modern overall. It is still a little bit behind Western Europe. If you look at the stats for GDP per capita using the European Union as a benchmark, then yeah, it still has maybe another 10 years to go, plus or minus, to catch up and actually overtake much of Western Europe. I actually saw one economic forecast that said that the GDP per capita of Poland will overtake the United Kingdom, which has left the European Union, but it will overtake the UK by 2030. Now, obviously we'll have to wait another 6 years to see if that comes to pass. A lot of things can happen, but isn't that remarkable that a country like Poland, where it's seen so much emigration since the 1990s, to places like the United Kingdom, might be in the future going to see the reverse. You might see a lot of Brits starting to move for economic reasons to a place like Poland. That is definitely a growing trend in general, just to see people from Western Europe and even North America move here to Poland. So what kind of lifestyle are you going to get here? Well, it's not going to be a backward lifestyle. You're probably going to find much of the same stuff, same level, more or less, as you're going to find back home in terms of infrastructure, restaurants, amenities in general, your fitness club, theater, yeah, shopping malls, just the whole array of things that you get in a big capital city. Here, the population is over 2 million. Not really sure what it is because with the Russo-Ukrainian war, so many Ukrainians came through here. I'm not sure how many stayed, but definitely there is a very significant Ukrainian community here as well as Belarusian, with the political oppression that has increased in Belarus since 2020, there are a lot of Belarusians also living here in the capital of Poland. So basically, you're not moving to a third world country. And that is one thing that a lot of people haven't been here. They probably have a stereotype from 20 years ago when things were definitely much more primitive and limited.
Mother of God, we're in Eastern Europe.
So you're not really going to compromise much in terms of the amenities and services that you can get here in Poland compared to, say, North America or Western Europe. There really isn't much of a difference nowadays. And commensurately, whilst there is a difference in price, it is not as big as it used to be 20 years ago. It is cheaper here than, you know, a typical commensurate sized city in Western Europe, like a city that's between 2 and 3 million people. It definitely is a bit cheaper, maybe 30%, but it is not pennies on the dollar. You're not coming here like that Stereotype from the film Eurotrip, which I think was made, it's made over 20 years ago, maybe even 30 years ago at this point, where they go to Bratislava and basically with a few coins they're able to buy half the city, and it looks completely like a hellhole.
$1.83 American. What are we gonna get with that? Gotta love that exchange rate. Fine.
Dinner is served. Would the masters care for anything else?
I think we're good. Thanks.
That's obviously not the case today. Prices are cheaper on average, so you're going to get more value for your dollar or your pound or your euro or your yen, whatever currency you're using, than you get back home, presumably from where you're watching this video, but it is not going to be massive like it was in the past. So the climate here in Poland, now I've shot a lot of videos in the last year when the weather was nice. The summers are definitely nice and warm here, but this is Central Europe, so the winters are quite cold. Now the snow has already melted, we don't have that anymore, and it's actually not that cold today, but it is very gray, and that is typical of Warsaw, is that it is quite gray during the winter. Obviously it snows and it can get down to, I think the coldest I felt here was maybe -10, so not super cold, but obviously if you are looking for a warm climate all year round, this is not going to be the place to hang out for you in winter. But at the same time, you do get that seasonal variation, which I particularly like. But I am not such a fan of the fact that there isn't so much sunshine in the winter. So that is one little minus, I think, on the climate. Local traditions and, say, food and stuff. Poland is a predominantly Catholic country, so they celebrate the Catholic holidays in general and traditions. Probably a bit more than the rest of Europe, I would say, overall. Maybe a bit similar to Italy. At least that's my recollection of living in Italy, also a Catholic country in majority. And local food, it is pretty similar to other parts of Central Europe. You're going to have your pierogi, that is the classic dumpling here, and many other specialties that you find here in Poland. And there is a wide array of restaurants like you'd expect in most prosperous, because this is a prosperous city. So definitely the food options in terms of restaurants, bars, clubs, all that kind of stuff, entertainment, has dramatically improved in the last 10 years. I remember coming here almost 10 years ago and it was not as impressive as it is today. So there's some of the other things that are important to note locally. Also here in Warsaw, I think it's quite a safe city relative to other parts of Europe. Petty crime I haven't noticed it as being any sort of significant issue. Whilst I've been here on and off over the last year on my trips here, also from local friends, no one really talks about Central Warsaw having a particularly big issue with crime. Of course, like all big cities, 2 to 3 million people, you need to use common sense, not do something silly. But say, to give a comparison, like my trips to Barcelona over the years, Barcelona is definitely significantly more dangerous in terms of petty crime and just crime in general than you're going to see here in Warsaw. Now, another issue that comes up, especially if you guys are moving here from the core Anglosphere, that is the level of English. And the level of English here in Poland is quite high. There is a company, Education First, they do a ranking, and Poland is typically in the first tier of countries that speak English, whose local population speaks English as a second language. It's not quite as good English as, say, the Netherlands or Sweden, but, you know, on the whole, it's one of the best places in terms of the local speaking English. That's not obviously a country where English is the official language, so that's a big plus. That makes it a lot easier, obviously, in terms of coming and getting set up in the beginning. So level English is quite high. However, and this is the big caveat, if you're planning to live in Poland, set up a local social circle, maybe date some of the local ladies, then relying on English is a significant disadvantage. It will be extremely hard to get into the higher level local social circles if you rely on English, if you don't speak Polish. And Polish is a significantly harder language than, say, Spanish, right? With which probably most of you watching this video, especially if you're American, have tried to learn some at some stage. Polish is considerably more difficult than Spanish, and a bit more difficult in my experience than the other Slavic languages around it that I've learned personally. So Russian, Ukrainian, and Belarusian. I thought the grammar is a bit trickier in Polish. So whilst the level of English is higher than other countries, other alternatives in Europe, reality is that you will find a bit limited socially if you don't learn Polish. And obviously that's going to be a significant investment of time, probably 2 to 3 years at least, to learn decent Polish. Otherwise, you're going to basically hang out almost certainly with other foreigners here in Warsaw. Maybe that's fine for you, but I think that is a big limitation on the quality of life you're going to have in Warsaw if you do that. So I've run through some of the things you need to consider when deciding if Warsaw, Poland is a place that you could maybe live in, maybe not all year round because it is quite cold and snowy and gray in the winter at times, but you know, that flag there, if that's what you see living your life under in the future, then the next thing you need to consider is, well, how are you going to do that from a legal point of view? Because maybe you've got a European Union passport, then it's pretty easy, right? You can just move to Poland basically as an EU citizen. You're probably already aware of that, but it becomes a more complex issue if you're a non-EU citizen. And for them, well, basically you are limited to 90 days every 180 within the Schengen area. Now the Schengen area it overlaps with the European Union, but it's not actually all of the European Union. There are some exceptions like Ireland currently, which is not in the Schengen area. And there's some countries that are not in the European Union that are in Schengen. Some examples of those would be countries like Norway or Switzerland, but they overlap pretty well. And you are limited to 90 days every 180. It is a common travel area. Normally there are no passport controls or border customs checks when you travel from one member of Schengen to the other. So for example, if I were to leave and go to Berlin in Germany, then in principle they're not going to check my passport. They're not going to ask me, you know, are you carrying X amount of, I don't know, what you're limited in. Alcohol, for example, you can transport that from one to the other. So that is limited to 90 days. So you need to be obviously careful that it's not 90 days in just Poland. If you go to Germany afterwards, then you will have exceeded the number of days legally you can stay in the Schengen area. However, for Poland and for American citizens, there is a separate agreement by which you can actually stay here 90 days upon entry and exit. So that is something that's a bit complicated. You need to be careful of, because you can stay 90 days, stay here in Warsaw, and then maybe cross the border and go to Ukraine, to Lviv, and then you come back, or you fly, you just take a flight to, say, London, United Kingdom. The United Kingdom is not in the Schengen area. And then you come back again, and that's all fine. But if, say, you were then to go to Berlin in Germany, well, you'd have exceeded your 90 days every 180 within the Schengen area. So you need to be very careful, but there is that little exception or advantage to being an American citizen here in Poland. So that is also why it is increasingly popular with Americans who want to live here for a lot of the year, but maybe don't go through and get residency, because they can come back and forth and they have that advantage of not being limited to the 90 days within Poland every 180. It's just within Schengen. So it's a little bit complex. But the way to get around all of these issues, if you are a non-EU citizen, is to get residency. And there are many ways to do that. You can become a student here, you can start a company, be employed here, you can get a normal job here and get the visa. You can marry a Polish citizen and look to emigrate here. So there are lots of ways to do that, and then afterwards, after you have your visa and residency, you will be legally entitled to stay in Poland and make this your home. So there's just a few of the ways that you can achieve that going forward. So next up, and this is the one that I guess most guys watch my channel for in reality, that is, what is the value of dating in Warsaw, Poland, if you decide to spend time here. So here in Poland, like much of the region, obesity is not much of an issue, especially amongst the young people. You will not see many overweight Polish people, or even, you don't even see that many overweight foreigners actually here. So in general, yeah, obesity is not a big issue. That obviously is a game changer if you are a single guy, because as we are well aware, overweightness and obesity is a massive problem, especially in the core Anglosphere, and double down that especially in North America, in the particularly US, right? You have those supersized men and women. Obesity is a huge crisis, and it's pretty bad, obviously, in terms of your long-term health. And yeah, it's not very attractive. So here in Warsaw, in Poland, there aren't so many overweight people. So that goes for women, say single women. Very unusual to see someone overweight, never mind obese. So big advantage number one. And of course, in general, Poles are quite well known for being the pretty Poles, basically. Women in general tend to be not just slim, also maybe a little bit more classical feminine in this region. It's not all, of course, just about looks either. Let's say they have more reputation in this region in general for being a bit better educated, a bit more respectful, a little bit more caring than you're going to see typically in North America in particular nowadays. And maybe also a bit more loyal could be a way to describe them as well if they find the right guy. But you need to know what you're doing. If you think you're just going to show up in 2024 waving an American or a British or an Irish passport, whatever it happens to be, I think that's going to impress the local ladies, you are about 30 years too late to the party, I suspect, because that doesn't work. I have another video about that. I'll link it on the card down below in the description. You're going to have to bring a lot more to the table. Most girls here are not particularly looking to date a foreigner, and moreover, one that does not speak Polish. So that's probably a big surprise if you haven't been much in Poland. You might think, oh, everybody speaks English, but in terms of looking for a relationship, long-term, with a guy who will be introduced to the family, not speaking Polish is definitely a big minus from what I've seen with friends and with clients. The guys who do the best, easily hands down the guys that speak Polish. It gives them a huge advantage. You don't come here thinking this is a land of desperado supermodels hoping to go to America. Again, you're 30 years too late to the party. So probably going to have to work in things like your social circle and actually be a guy of, high value being the type of guy that women are actually interested in dating, probably universally. And then, yeah, you can kind of get the local boost by having a high value local social circle. And of course, if you learn Polish, even better. It's not a sine qua non. It, of course, doesn't mean that no one will date you if you don't speak Polish, but it is a significant advantage from what I see. On top of it, Warsaw nowadays in 2024 has a quite large diaspora community of not just Ukrainians, as most people are maybe aware with the Russo-Ukrainian war, and it's been a neighboring country that has taken in a lot of Ukrainians since February 2022, but also it has significant minority of Belarusians, also a neighboring country, in particular young people who are a little bit more open to the world, a little bit more pro-Western than the average Belarusian. They don't see many prospects in Belarus, in particular since August 2020. So as I often say on my channel, the best of Belarus has more or less left, and this is one of the countries where it is easier for them to get a visa and residency, so they tend to come to Warsaw. And there's actually like lots of bars, clubs, cultural organizations, nightclubs even, and theaters. There's like a whole new world actually that lives parallel here in Poland, in particular the capital Warsaw, for these communities, because obviously a lot of people have evacuated in Ukraine's case or expatriated in Belarus's case with what has happened politically in the last 4 years. So in terms of dating, Ukrainians and Belarusians are world-renowned also for their beauty, and they're also known for that classical femininity, being slim, being maybe a bit more agreeable, better educated, more respectful than typically you're going to find in maybe definitely the core Anglosphere. So on top of that, not only do you have the pretty Poles, you have the beautiful Belarusians and the cute Ukrainians. So also with those communities, being in a local social circle relevant to them and going to their places that they frequent, as well as possibly speaking their languages, going to give you
Объедновать.
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 Yeah. Okay.
Ah, this Belarusian stuff and getting it down.
Ashchagenya.
Ashchagenya.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Ah, it sounds weird, and it? It sounds like something more oriental to me so far. Of course, a big advantage over the typical, I wouldn't say tourist, although you're going to be put in that tourist box, even if you're not really a tourist, you're actually living here in Warsaw, but you rely on English, you hang around with other core Anglosphere people. So say Americans, and it doesn't even have to be core Anglosphere, you're hanging around with Germans, Italians, maybe Western Europeans, maybe Latin Americans here. You're going to be in another box than if you're going to be hanging around with the local Poles or other people from the region like Belarusians and Ukrainians. So that is what I'd say is definitely a very attractive place from that point of view, but you need to know what you're actually doing and have a plan for Warsaw. Де ми сьогодні, Анжела?
В Варшаві, в Польщі.
У Варшаві. Це твій перший раз тут?
Так, це перший раз мій от у Варшаві. Ну, зовсім в Польщі. Перший раз.
Добре. І що ти думаєш?
Ну, мені подобається, особливо історичний центр. Він трішки схожий з нашим Львовом, з нашим
Львів,
коханим Львовом.
So I'm here, right in the city center of Warsaw. Just behind me, we have the metro. Just up ahead of me, we have Warszawa Centralna, so the central train station. And this is a place very familiar to visitors to Warsaw and guys who are going to be moving here, because either they're going to fly in, I guess, and take a taxi to wherever they're staying, or they may actually arrive by train directly, or they're going to end up hanging around here in the center, because you also have just behind me, well, let me put it up for you, the main landmark. You should see it there, Palace of Science and Culture. But what is the typical foreigner, guy, single, maybe from 25 to 45, 50, who moves maybe just for a month to check it out, or maybe they decide that they're going to spend the year in Warsaw, Poland? Well, unfortunately, because so few of them come here and know the city, have some friends already who are local, speak any Polish, they will inevitably start off almost certainly as ability nomads and then graduate to hang around with other foreigners in the same situation. So they'll hang out in groups and they will go to the most obvious places that are also frequented by, normally kind of the Anglophone community, or even worse, they band in groups of the notorious day gamers and they'll be a public nuisance on this very street during the summer. The weather is obviously now okay for it because we're all out in t-shirts, and that's what you see, and they'll pester girls up and down the street trying to get a phone number, like a dating panhandler. It's not living a very high level life if that's what you end up doing, and you end up in the kind of like, I guess it's known as an expat bubble, but basically it's a little bit of a drifter bubble, a lot of it. Guys are moving from place to place because of the ability now to be a digital nomad, and yeah, they don't really see Poland maybe as a long-term prospect. They're here, they check it out for a few months. It's not super cheap anymore. Possibly they don't do very well with the local ladies ultimately, and then they go on somewhere else. So they end up a little bit disappointed in their experience of being here in Poland. At least that's the feedback I get from a lot of guys who come up to me, who watch the channel. Ultimately, they don't get the same kind of experience as, say, and many of them have been to, say, Ukraine before. Obviously, the Russo-Ukrainian war intensified in February 2022, and they don't really get that experience here. But if you decide to come with the insider, your Irish boy here, as I'm known as by my clients, then Warsaw can be a very interesting, dynamic, and super cool place to spend, either like, as I recommend, at least 3 months during the year, or maybe even you spend all year here, in spite of it being a little bit cold and gray during the winter. So how do I structure things to help my clients here? Well, you will come on an experience for up to a week here in Warsaw in Poland, and we will go out and we will socialize with my social circle here in the places that I think are the best fit for you to meet the kind of people. Either it's going to be high-level guys and the uber beautiful ladies of Warsaw, Poland, whether they happen to be the pretty Poles or Ukrainian Belarusians or from somewhere else in the world. There are increasingly more people moving here from kind of everywhere if you look around in the center of Warsaw. So that is the first thing. You won't be building ornaments. You won't be in some kind of, to be frank, considered low value group of foreign guys chasing girls, hunting either here on the streets, near the train station, or at a very obvious touristic bar or club that really no self-respecting Warsavian girl is going to frequent in reality. Also, I have, huge amount of knowledge, the encyclopedic knowledge of being over here in this region for over 10 years. I can help you with lots of different issues. We'll figure out, do you have things like your Instagram optimized? It is super important in 2024. If you do not have a good Instagram, it is a major handicap. You need to have your social media on point in order to communicate your value that I'm sure you obviously should have to come and live the in-person experience, but it's something that a lot of guys don't communicate. They don't have it set up properly. Also going to be with me so I can obviously coach things that you are doing socially that could be improved on, and basically you will come here and have an unforgettable experience, enjoy the best of Warsaw, and save yourself a few months trying to figure things out, because even if you read on these expat forums, they're not telling you where the best places are to go to, because if they published them there and all these guys went to them, they would not be the best places. It would be full of horny guys, foreign guys, and the local girls, or just the girls in general who live here, they will not go there if it becomes like that. So you need to know. So that is what we will do. We will of course be there, hitting up the best places, socializing with the uber hotties of the city. The ones that are in my social group, we will go out, party hard, have a blast, and basically you will live your best life in Warsaw for at least 1 week with me. And then, if it's the city for you, we can discuss how you're going to set yourself up. Maybe you want to get residency, maybe you want to rent a long-term apartment here, and maybe the most prestigious building, which is just up in front of me, actually, as I walk here in the center. Or maybe you even want to buy property here in Warsaw. Or maybe Warsaw is not the spot for you, because I also bring my clients to the alternatives, not just here in Warsaw, Poland, but also to Vilnius in Lithuania. Recently went there with one of my clients, but mainly in the Baltics. We've been focusing on Riga, the land of the leggy blonde. Some of the tallest people in the world and some of the blondest. So if that's your preference, then that is a good spot. Also a pretty big city on the Baltic Sea. Also, we're bringing them to Chisinau, crazy Chisinau in Mad Moldova. Probably the closest in terms of getting experience like in Ukraine without the risk of Russian rocket attack, at least not a significant risk at the moment. Been going there a lot during the summer, in particular in 2022 and 2023. Lots of fun there. On top of that, going all the way over to the steppes of Central Asia, to Kazakhstan. Been going to Almaty, the almighty, amazingly beautiful place with mountains, lakes, canyons nearby, full of friendly Kazakhstanis. Almaty is probably about 85% Asian in ethnicity, 15% European descent. And also you got Astana, the capital, also similar kind of demographics as to Almaty. Really kind of unusual place to go. I don't think it's really advertised that much. I think Kazakhstan still suffers from the Borat stereotype of over 20 years ago, unfortunately. And maybe fortunate because it's not overrun by tourism. It's a super cool place to hit up. So basically, if you are interested and think that you are a good fit for the in-person experience with me, then down below in the description to this video is an application form. It is by application only. Not everybody who is interested gets to come. I screen everybody first. But before you do that, if you're new to my content, to my channel, then definitely check out 3 playlists I'm going to put up on cards, also down below in the video description. They are, first of all, a series of vlogs where I've gone with my clients, give you a bit more of the flavor, what to expect on the in-person experience. Then you got my kind of tutorials for dating the uber beautiful women of this region, 9s and 10s, the Olympian level of beauty that you find in abundance in this region. And thirdly, you have my vodka podcast series where I dive deep into the mindset of this region. And basically I'm focusing on a region that I have dubbed New Europe. Well, I wasn't the original person who dubbed it New Europe. It was actually many years ago. He called this region basically, we'll say, east of Germany and west of Russia as New Europe, and that is the region I'm focusing on for now. I think it is the best region for you to consider moving to and spending maybe 3 to 12 months per year. So, you know, sun is about to set over the train station here in Warsaw, Poland. So that is it. You can make a decision based on what I've described here, whether you should move to Poland in 2024. So with that, I will say papa from Warsaw, Poland, and maybe see you here in person in 2024.
SAR Experience.
The city has such a variety of different nightlife. You can go to obviously rock pubs, you can go to your hipster places, if you want with more commercial tunes, you can go to maybe one of the best electronic music clubs, higher end of clubs in all of Europe.